Well, Dave, we have control of our dates so we can make it happen.
Okay, I got you.
Hey, Davis, we're live on YouTube.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order and wish everyone a happy Mardi Gras. A roll call of the board members. I will start at the top. Director Perotti.
Here.
Director Lemberger.
Present.
Director McQuarrie.
Here.
Director Weinberg. Absent. Director Sheeler.
Present.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Here.
And Chair Davis is present. So, Madam Clerk, Christina, could I have the report regarding the posting of the agenda, please?
Good morning.
Good morning.
The agenda was posted on Friday, February 12th, 2021 at MTD's administrative office, mailed and emailed to those on the agenda list, and posted on MTD's website.
Okay, very good. That takes us to the consent calendar. There are two items on the consent calendar today. The approval of the prior minutes for the meeting of January 19th, 2020. And the item 5, the cash report for the following dates, January 9th through January 22nd, January 23rd through February 5th. All of those are 2021. I do have some comments on the minutes, if I could, just to start with. Christina, just for note, under the call to order at the beginning, I'd like it to read that Chair Davis opened the meeting recognizing the recent passing of the MTD employee Polly Perez and called for a moment of silence. And then at the adjournment, just to shorten this up, to say Chair Davis adjourned the meeting in honor of MTD employee Polly Perez at 10:26. With those minor changes, do I have any other questions or changes to either of the items here? Okay,
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
okay. Okay, I have a motion by Director Tabor, second by Mr. McQuarrie. I'll start at the top. Director Perotti.
Aye.
Director Lemberger.
Aye.
Director McQuarrie.
Yes.
Director Weinberg is absent. Director Sheeler. Hey, Chuck, could you mute yourself when you're off?
Yeah. Thank you. I got you.
Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
And Chair Davis votes yes. So the consent calendar is approved. That takes us to the public comment, item 6. This is for anyone in the public who wishes to speak for items not on today's agenda, but within the purview of the Metropolitan Transit District. And Clerk, do I have anyone who wishes to speak under general public comment?
I have no comments at this time.
Good, thank you very much. Takes us to our first agenda item of substance. Item 7, the adoption of fiscal year 2021 Measure A program of projects submittal. Mr. Estrada, General Manager Estrada. Jerry?
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis, members of the board. I'm going to hand this right off to Ms. Syed to present this item. It's an annual request for Measure A funding. Thais, it's all yours.
Good morning, Chair Davis and members of the board, Mr. Estrada. We have prepared the Measure A program of projects form today for the board meeting, as this is an annual agenda item. SBCAG provides Measure A estimated revenues, excuse me, which are reflected on the form. Fiscal year 2021-22 estimated operating revenues for MTD are 2.2 million and estimated capital revenues are 1 million. This program of projects form is required to be submitted to SBCAG so that MTD can receive its Measure A allocation of operating and capital revenues. This is an action item, and we are recommending the board approve the submittal of this Measure A program of projects form.
Good, thank you very much, Thais. Jerry, I'm going to ask you just for a second, if Director Lemberger is fairly new, you want to give just a 5-second overview of Measure A and what our allocations were and where this fits in?
Sure, real, briefly, Measure A sales tax revenue, obviously the voters passed, I think it was 2008, 2009, within the county. For Santa Barbara MTD, the way it worked was it was essentially status quo. What we did was we worked with the South County jurisdictions, the city of Santa Barbara, city of Carpinteria, et cetera, and we took the contracts we already had, and whatever percentage that was of their Measure D funds at that time, we were essentially became a direct recipient in Measure A of the same percentage. So for example, City of Goleta, and I'll just pull a number off the top of my head, I think 12% of their Measure D had been committed to MTD for transit projects on the South Coast. Well, now by formula, 12% of their Measure A comes to MTD for operating assistance. And that's about $2 million a year at this point, all in, I think, with all of where it is today. Anyway, the other pot is capital funding that the SBCAG board recently provided us the flexibility to use for operating if necessary. But that's about $1 million a year. And that was to offset the loss of CMAQ funds, congestion mitigation, air quality funds to our region once we reached attainment. MTD had used those funds historically for capital bus acquisitions, some demo projects. So the group, as a consensus and a part of what we move forward with Measure A, set that aside for MTD as well.
Okay, so in summary, basically, there's a special sales tax approved by the voters that allows both money for operations as well as capital on an annual basis going forward. Okay, so questions for staff at this point? It's pretty straightforward.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Chuck.
On the backup sheet, the summary for information systems at $4.9 million is greater than our vehicle purchases. And I'm wondering, to the extent of MTD, what are we spending that much money on for information services? I didn't realize we spent more on that than we did on buses.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a forecast. We're going to go into a little bit later. I was going to cover it in competitive grant opportunities. But what we have, historically, we use much more than that for bus purchases. But for bus acquisitions, we are dependent on discretionary grant opportunities. Our formula funds, and what you see is a financially constrained budget there, Chuck, usually is local match for bus purchases. I mean, if we put bus purchases in there, it wouldn't be financially constrained. It'd be like double the size of that capital budget easily. What you're seeing as far as it pertains to IT, for example, is we forecasted potentially improvements to our fare payment system to go to contactless payment systems. And we're just essentially ballparking in the future. That might be $1.5 million, 1.8. Plus there are other systems that we're going to need to upgrade. For example, our accounting software and HR softwares from the 90s. We really need, it's really, really difficult to maintain that. We've been putting it off as long as we can. So there are some acquisitions that we're going to need to make with our formula funds, but we're going to have to aggressively go after competitive funds. And that's actually coming up a little bit later in the discussion on one of the other agenda items.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Other questions or comments about Director Sheeler? Bill?
Thank you, Chair. This isn't necessarily directly related to this, but since the issue of SBCAG came up, I'm just wondering what SBCAG's level of awareness is and what they can possibly do to advocate on the district's behalf regarding the potential loss of small transit intensive communities funding.
You want me?
Oh, yeah, go. I'm sorry, Jerry. I didn't want to intercede, but go ahead and answer.
Sure. As it pertains to Measure A item and our long-term capital funding, what SBCAG recently did, and I think what you're referring to, Director Sheeler, is the potential loss of STIC funding, small transit intensive communities. That will happen if our urbanized area, at least under current transportation law, exceeds 200,000 as a result of the 2020 census. I think we're not going to see census data till a little bit later. It's being delayed, maybe later this year. SBCAG has been supportive of us on this measure, working with us as well as Congressman Carbajal to try and create maybe a soft landing with this in the long run. but it's a national funding issue. And I just don't see, we've tried, there's only a few of us that are probably affected in 2020 decennial census. So we're getting as much assistance as I think we can locally from our MPO on that particular issue, and we do appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Other questions at this point? Okay, not seeing anyone jump in. Jen, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just a quick question for my edification. What does the intelligent transportation systems cover?
Jerry?
Yeah, sorry to take the show from you here at Thais a little bit, but
All right.
I'll get the intelligent. Essentially, there's core business applications, which we have under the IT section there. Intelligent transportation systems is typically referred to much bigger transportation projects, such as the AVL system we put in a number of years ago, contactless, where we're talking about maybe millions, and we're gonna have to go after discretionary funds to support it. So it's really major capital initiatives that relate to technology in transportation.
Thanks.
Yeah, Thais, if I jump in and overrule me, to feel free. So, okay. Other questions from the board? Okay, not seeing any. I'm going to go to Christina. Madam Clerk, do I have anyone who wishes to speak from the public on this item?
There are no public comments at this time.
Good, thank you very much. That takes us back to the board. We're looking at a recommendation that the board approve the submittal of the Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District Measure A program of projects for fiscal year 2021 to 2022.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Director Perotti. Looking for a second from Director Tabor. I will roll call vote on this item. Director Perotti.
Aye.
Director Limburger.
Aye.
Director McQuarrie. You'll find that. Yeah, you'll find that button. Okay, Director Weinberg is absent. Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and Chair Davis votes yes also. That motion is approved. Yes, thanks for the report. And don't forget, jump on me.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you for your work. Okay, takes us to item 8. This is fiscal year 2021 budget revision. Staff will recommend the board adopt the attached draft fiscal year 2021 budget revision. You want to introduce Mr. Strada? Can I jump right to Mr. Davis?
Oh, feel free. Mr. Davis is ready to go.
Hey, cousin Dave. Hey, cousin Brad. Go.
All righty. Good morning, Chair Davis and members of the board. And first thing I'd like to do is to introduce myself to Director Limburger, who have not yet had an opportunity to meet Zoom or otherwise. Extend my personal welcome to you to the board. Jumping into the actual item at hand, the board packet includes a detailed report and budget revision tables, as well as those for the first 6 months of the year. For the presentation, I'm going to pretty much limit my focus to the major factors driving the revisions and referencing the 6-month results, as well as the effects of the COVID-19 on the district's financial condition. So next slide, please. Okay, the first point I want to emphasize is that while our revenue streams are drastically down this year, federal emergency relief funding and this year through the CARES Act will make up fully the difference and eliminate the deficits that you see here on this chart, which are pre-relief funding. Really the main point I want to make here in the aggregate is that the budget revision includes a 5% reduction to both our operating revenues and our operating expenses. And the net effect of that is to reduce that pre-relief funding difference from 8.5 million down to $8 million. Next slide, please. Okay, as indicated in the board report, these are the 3 key items affecting the budget revision. While not specifically mentioned, the coronavirus pandemic plays a part in all of these and isn't just not specifically called out. But with respect to fare collection, the main issue regarding the budget is the suspension of fare collection is now going to extend beyond mid-year. It was budgeted to restart then, but that will be moving back, obviously affecting our operating revenue. Regarding sales tax revenue, really, the good news is that our sales tax receipts continue to be strong and basically in line with last year's, rather than dropping significantly, which was anticipated at the start of the fiscal year. And then finally, the reduced service level, similar to the fare revenue collection, due to the continued strength of the pandemic, we are continuing to suspend many of our services longer than expected, which were budgeted to restart with January as well. So next slide, please. Okay, this chart pretty much tells the fare revenue story, with the top bar representing the projected fare revenue for this fiscal year. I do want to mention that this is fare revenue only. It's one component of our overall capital revenue, but it is certainly the one that is hardest hit by the pandemic and the policies that are in place as a result of that. So again, the main issue is that we're now projecting that the fare collection will not begin until May. This is just an estimate at this time. We'd hope that it would be better, but really we're just going to have to look at the factors at that time and make a decision on whether we're able to restart the collection of fares, which has to do with the really with the health measures in effect and the installation of driver barriers, which are in progress and should definitely be done before then. Excuse me, catch myself here. Okay. The next item I wanted to mention, yes, is that the suspension of onboard fare collection also extends to our contract fare programs. The most financially significant of those are agreements with Santa Barbara City College and UCSB, which allow students to ride the bus by presenting their student IDs. At this point, it looks like that those programs will not be reinstated this year at all. Additionally, while not specifically part of fare revenue, the line 28, which serves the UCSB area and Eastern Goleta, will also not be restarting this fiscal year, and that affects another fare revenue or another operating revenue category, that of local and state operating assistance, and that's essentially nearly a $2 million loss when actually we include the line 1224. Next slide, please. Okay, the next topic I wanted to discuss was sales tax revenue. As reported in the first quarter update a couple of months ago, sales tax revenue receipts have not been depressed as anticipated. Actual sales tax revenue represented by the green columns with the budgeted amounts in the blue line. Note that the budgeted estimates in the early months are particularly low. This was based on the assumption that the economic activity would continue at the levels experienced last spring at the onset of the pandemic and the stay-home orders. Such was not the case, as consumer sales did rebound this summer and have continued to do so for through the first 7 months of this fiscal year. This is apparently due to pent-up demand after the spring letdown, and at this point, and based upon the governor's budget, we anticipate that to continue for the balance of this fiscal year. Next slide, please. This slide is slightly different in that it's including the actual sales tax receipts for last fiscal year. And I think the important point to note is how closely that mirrors our actual receipts for this year. In fact, in 4 of the 7 months shown, our sales tax revenue receipts actually exceed what we received last year. And I didn't mention it previously, but when I talk about sales tax revenue, I'm talking about 2 programs, the state's TDA local transportation fund, as well as the local Measure A operating assistance. Next slide, please. This slide displays service levels represented by revenue hours. The last 2 columns to the right show the fiscal year 21 budgeted revenue hours in green and the revised revenue hours in gold. I've also included recent historical levels for comparative purposes and to sort of show the extent of the current reduction in the service level. Most predominantly, those that are currently suspended are the Line 28, the Crosstown and Seaside shuttles, the new microtransit service, and the commuter train first last mile service. Additionally, the sporadic need of school boosters has also brought down the projected revenue hours for this year. Most services are expected to return sometime in fiscal year 21-22, although to what degree will be determined on the projected demand and other factors at that time. The direct effect of these service cutbacks is to reduce operating costs, which I'm now going to cover. Next slide, please. Okay. As stated earlier, the revised operating budget represents a 5% reduction from the initially approved level last June. At the forefront of the changes, as mentioned before, is the reduction in the service level. This directly affects driver wages and benefits and other direct variable costs, such as the cost of fuel, bus parts, and tire lease, and other consumables such as that. With the reduced service level, this has also affected the need for driver overtime, which is actually down substantially from last year, as well as that budgeted for this year, which further is bringing down operating costs. As has been the case in the past, unfilled vacancies, particularly with mechanics and service workers, is also contributing to coming in under budget in some areas. Also,
Chair, I had a question. Yes, I was wondering, where would the new safety measures that are being deployed, what category do those fall in, and are those showing up in any of those categories?
The safety policies in particular have not resulted in a huge cost. I guess maybe I'd answer that by saying that the costs incurred as a result of the pandemic for additional services and supplies, they are in the general overhead budget.
Okay.
And that answers your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Also bringing down expenses is a correction, as I had inadvertently included anticipated distribution of CARES Act funding to our other local transit providers, that is Easy Lift and my mind's going blank.
SBK.
Clean Air Express, excuse me, the Clean Air Express that's administered by SBCAG. So that was that came to $366,000. That did have a somewhat significant effect on the budget and cost reduction. There's a multitude of other operating cost adjustments, but for the most part, the ones that I just mentioned constitute the bulk of the change in operating outlays. And next slide, please. Okay, I just wanted to briefly touch on a couple of things for the capital project budget revision. In particular is the first line item there for bus purchases. This is the major reduction is simply the result of the fact that we were not approved for any of the 3 discretionary grants that we submitted for the replacement of our buses, for the most part with battery electric buses. All that remains in there at this point are the 4 New Flyer 40-foot electric buses that we're under contract for, and the 3 micro transit vans. As far as the bus improvements, it shows a dip of 50%, but really that's more of an accounting adjustment to move a portion of that cost into future years. And then the last item of significance is for operating facilities with the increase, and that's related to the Charge Ready program as we prepare to install capability for charging 14 buses at our Terminal 1 facility. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to General Manager Estrada to review the federal relief funding and other pertinent information on the district's financial outlook. And of course, I'm available to answer any questions at the completion of the presentation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brad. Good work. Jerry?
Yeah, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. What you have in front of you is a constrained 5-year capital budget forecast. It's our draft capital budget forecast. We'll be coming back to you in March with a draft budget for next fiscal year, which will include the capital budget forecast. But what I wanted to share with you, today at this point was an idea of essentially, actually this particular item, I have to apologize for it, is for the next agenda. I have this particular slide. The slide that there was a different slide I think that Mr. Davis had here that would show the CARES Act funding. Can we get to that one? That's the one we want. Yes, that other slide should be for the next agenda item. Thank you. Federal relief funding is what we want to talk about at this point. And what we're looking at here, and again, thank you to Mr. Davis and Ms. Syed for all their work to get us to this point. And I think this is the big question, is how dependent are we at this point, our industry, on the stimulus funding we're receiving from the federal government, and significant. And the green line gives you an idea of what we're forecasting for not only the CARES Act funding, but the recent CRISA funding, which was a second stimulus funding for public transit. And as you can see right now, we're projecting that we'd be able to get through the 4th quarter of fiscal year 22. So through this year and through the next fiscal year is what we anticipate. Now, these numbers are draft. We have, we're still coming with a draft budget. It won't really be till May or June that we really nail down next fiscal year. But at this point, we are trending along those lines and stretching those funds as long as we can. I'd also like to point out to the board members and the public that when Mr. Davis was talking about prior year comparisons, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but that's last fiscal year, which included an impact from the pandemic, about 3 to 4 months of service reduction and no fare collection. So when you see those prior year figures that were on those charts earlier, understand that's not a baseline of post-pandemic numbers. For example, our fares were well over $6 million before the pandemic a year. But on that slide, you see that it appears to be smaller. So there has been an even bigger impact than what you see there from what our revenues were and what our expenses were prior to the pandemic. What you saw today was a comparison of last fiscal year to this fiscal year. From an accounting perspective, it makes sense. But a lot of people are thinking post-pandemic and returning to old service levels. That'll be a different chart. And that's something Mr. Davis and I will work on when we come forward with next year's fiscal year budget, is providing you in the public with a baseline showing you where we were before the pandemic on revenues and expenses and how far we've come, because I think those figures are a little bit misleading. They're accurate, but they don't show you that picture of how far we've reduced expenses and how far the revenue needs to come back up once we get to that point. So for this slide, what Mr. Davis has provided for us essentially indicates that we have enough federal funds at this point to get us through another fiscal year, and we'll see what's coming from Washington soon. I think when you look at how the pandemic and some of the long-term effects it's going to have on ridership and our ability to fill a bus again, it's going to take a number of years. So this is a big question for us going forward and when we can restore service levels, hopefully back to what they once were. So just wanted to share that with you on this particular staff item. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for General Manager Estrada or for Mr. Davis at this point?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Director Sheeler. Bill?
Thanks. Going back to looking at that chart about the reduction in capital expenditures and purchase of EVs, and just wondering how that affects our strategic plan to have an EV fleet by 2030.
As I mentioned, I would like to take the opportunity to answer that question on the next agenda item. I think it'll
Sounds
be,
good.
I'll be bringing that slide up at that point.
Okay, thanks.
Director Tabor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bump in this chart, the green line bump in this chart, is that reflective of the adjustment you're at in our budget revision for this quarter?
If I might, that's the addition of the CRISA funds. If you're talking about the green line.
Yes.
And yeah.
Okay. I just saw looked like we're using $500,000 less of the projected CARES Act funding. So it looked, that's about a $50 bump right there.
Yeah.
So this doesn't reflect the we're looking at today.
No, that's the addition of $5 million last December.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Director Pecori, Chuck?
On page 2 of the of our packet, I'm looking at other income and the interest on investments. I was wondering why we had a significant drop this year.
Jerry or Brad?
Yeah, I've got this one. Really, the main reason is that interest rates have dropped. I mean, simply plummeted over the last year. As I indicated in the report, we were earning 2.5%, a little bit more than a year ago, and now the figure is down to under 0.5%. So that's a 5-fold decrease in what the bulk of our working capital, where it is invested in the LAIF state fund.
Okay, thank you.
Director Prodi, Paula?
Thank you, Chair Davis. And maybe I missed it, but are we assuming, or am I assuming that once the safety shields are put in place, then at that point in time, when they're in all the buses, at that point in time, the revenue, the fees will start up again? When might that happen? Just out of curiosity.
Jerry?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I mean, in our guidelines that we put out, we had really included we would not do collection affairs when we were at this level. Now, obviously, things have fluctuated throughout the pandemic. The guidelines have changed, so it's really discretionary. It's at our point. One, yes, I would like the driver barriers to be fully installed, but I'd also like to see that our community is in a little bit more stable state than it has been the last few months as well. So it's going to be a combination of things, quite frankly, before we make that decision. But we are targeting, hopefully within a couple months, to be able to start the collection affairs.
Okay, great. That's a great idea. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Not seeing any. I will ask Christina, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone from the public wishes to speak on this item?
Not at this time.
Great, thank you very much. That takes us back. The recommendation here is to recommend the board adopt the draft fiscal year 2021 budget revision. Looking for a motion in a second.
I could move that we adopt the revision.
Director Vice Chair Tabor moved. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Director Parodi has seconded it. I will go a roll call vote. Okay. Director Parodi,
Aye.
Director Limburger,
Aye.
Director McQuarrie. You want to
Aye.
there you go. And I wanted to welcome Director Weinberg. Good morning, Dick. And you joined us at 8:45 for the record. Dick, a vote on the budget revision. Get yourself unmuted or raise your hand and I'll count you. There he goes. He voted yes. Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and Chair Davis votes yes. The budget revision is unanimously approved. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mr. Strada. That was a good report, and I'll see where it all goes from here. We'll see you back with a new budget soon.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 9, upcoming capital funding opportunities. General Manager Estrada, Jerry.
I'm going to go ahead and start this off with that one slide that we brought up earlier for this item. And then I'll be handing the matter off to Mr. Moss to go into more detail about the opportunities that we have before us. But what we wanted to show you, as I mentioned earlier, the 5-year capital budget forecast. Officially, this is a draft, but we'll be coming to you in March with the initial draft, the full package operating capital, much more of a discussion. But what I wanted to stress here is how dependent our industry is on these discretionary funding opportunities. What you see in front of you over those 5 years and the different groupings is primarily formula funds that we've accumulated over the years, as well as previously awarded discretionary funds. For example, in fiscal year 2021, the bus acquisitions that are included in there include the 4 40-foot battery electric buses. Those are primarily funded with Federal Transit Administration funds that we awarded competitively, that we had to compete for with nationally. We apply for those funds every single year. We haven't had an award, I think, since maybe 2015, 2016 was the last time we were successful. Again, we're competing with all the transit operators around the country for that funding, and it's very, very competitive. We were fortunate to get funded then. And what you see here in this financially constrained for the 5 years is we've pulled the bus acquisitions out, which we historically have had a separate list, because for bus acquisitions, we typically rely on discretionary funds, and we use our formula funds for local match. So when you look at our TAM, our Transit Asset Management list, which is kind of the flow of assets and how we're going to need to replace them, what we really have is about projected $15 million need by 2022, another $19 million by 24. In the meantime, what the agency has done is taken our formula funds and we've invested in a fleet renewal program, because we need to keep the existing fleet running and keep it in a state of good repair. And that's exactly what we're doing. So a lot of our formula funds have had to go into that because we haven't been awarded those discretionary fund opportunities. But we're going to continue to do it every year, every opportunity we reasonably can. What you also run into are smaller transit operators like our peers in North County. They don't necessarily have the staff to go after every opportunity. We don't either, but we are a little bit more aggressive at going after those discretionary opportunities. So when formula funds come to the county and have to be distributed among the operators, it becomes an issue of which projects and how much funding, and that'll be coming up again in the next few over the next few months as we address some of the opportunities before the MPO is going to pass through some funds to all the transit operators. So I wanted to share with you what it's kind of looking like and put some context to what Steve's about to share with you. So Steve, if you want to get into the details of some of the opportunities that we have before us, it's all yours.
Thank you, General Manager. And good morning, Board, Chair Davis and the rest of the Board.
Good morning, Steve.
Nice to see you this morning. So I was going to talk a little bit about 4 different programs that are all annual programs. 2 of them state-funded programs, the other 2 federal FTA-funded programs. First one of the state programs is called the State of Good Repair, California State of Good Repair. Some of you may have heard there's also a federal program of that name, but this is a completely different program run by the state. So every year the state allocates money to regional planning agencies such as SBCAG based on population, and to transit agencies such as us based on our percentage of statewide fare revenue collected. And each year annually, the money that comes directly to us, the fare revenue based, is approximately 140,000. It has been. This funding source is a little bit more stable than some others because it's based on the new vehicle registration fee beginning in 2018, fiscal year 2018. So it has been fairly stable and is likely not to change too much unless the amount collected on that vehicle registration fee were to increase greatly. And then the population-based share, SBCAG chooses to do 4-year call for projects with that money. It's up to them how they want to do that. There was one 4-year project that's ending this fiscal year, and then the next one that is underway now will cover fiscal years 21-22 through 24-25. We have applied for about 1.3 million of the 2.6 million that's estimated in the 4-year period from that pot. And we've applied for that for facility upgrades, what we're calling phase 1 of a massive facility upgrade project that MTD is beginning. So there's a meeting next week where the transit agencies and SBCAG staff will discuss the allocation of those funds, and then it'll come to TTAC in March for a recommendation from TTAC as well, the Technical Transportation Advisory Committee of SBCAG. So the project that we're asking to fund, the 1.3 million we're asking for, is an $8.8 million project. So we're only asking for 15% of the cost of the project to come from this program. Is there any questions on that program before I move on to the next one?
Chair?
I'm trying to unmute myself there, Bill. Director Sheeler, Bill.
Thanks, Chair. Let me see if I heard this correctly. One of the things the state of good repair was based on fare collections and statewide fare collections. Since we haven't been collecting fares and I don't know what they're doing elsewhere, is there an impact at all based on this?
Currently not. The state has understood the issue with fare collections around the state, and they're using previous year's numbers for this year and for next year as well, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jerry. I think it's this year and next year they've agreed to use fiscal year 18, 19 fare revenue numbers for the allocation. So it has not negatively affected us. So basically at the statewide level, half of the funds are allocated by the percentage of population of your area, and the other half are allocated by your percentage of fare revenue.
Okay, thanks for that explanation.
Okay.
Okay, you want to continue, Steve?
Yes, thank you. So the other state program I was going to talk about is the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program called LC-TOP. And that is one of the many programs the state funds with the cap and trade program. The LC-TOP gets 5% of the statewide revenue from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund each year. And that money also is allocated using the same method as the state of good repair, half based on population, which goes to SBCAG for their allocation, and half based on fare revenue, which comes directly to the transit operators. This program has been in existence a bit longer than the state of good repair. And every year that the program has been in existence, MTD has applied for at least half of the county level money, and we've been awarded, the percentage that we've been awarded over the years has varied substantially from about 25% up to last year, which was a unusual situation where the North County agencies didn't have any projects ready to go. And so we ended up getting about 75% of the funds last year, but with the understanding that they will not give us much money in this current year. This current year process is not really underway yet. The state hasn't even released the amounts that will be available for apportionment yet. That's expected basically any day now. And once that's underway, there'll be a process with the other operators in the county, similar to what happens with State of Good Repair, where we'll meet and make a recommendation, which presumably will then go to TTAC for a recommendation to the SBCAG board. So we've used this money for a variety of projects over the years, from operating projects to capital. Most recently, the last 2 years, we're planning to apply to our microtransit project. So that's basically it. I was going to talk about, I guess, on that program, unless there's any questions.
Any questions there? Not seeing any. Steve, continue.
All right, then I'll move on to a couple of federal programs that come again annually. As Jerry mentioned earlier, we apply for both of these each year. The last year we were successful on either one of them was in fiscal year 2016, when we got money that we've used to purchase the 10 most recent Gillig buses, and will be using to purchase the 4 New Flyer electric buses. The first of those is called 5339B, the Bus and Bus Facilities Program. And that one's open to basically any project that, that basically helps your agency continue to provide a high quality of transit service. Typically, we've applied for buses, although we could certainly apply for facilities and may be doing that either this year or in the future. That one has not yet been released by the federal government for this year, so we don't know how much money will be available or what the timeline will be for getting an application in. So the other one is 5339C, and that's the low or no emission program. It's a smaller program than the other one. And as the name would imply, it's limited to projects that are either low or no emission. And we've applied each year, the last several years, for funds for electric buses. This year, that one has been released. It's just was released last week. The applications are due April 12th, and nationwide, there's only 180 million available. So as you can imagine, it's going to be extremely competitive, as it always is. But we will definitely apply for funding on that program. And that kind of sums up those 2 federal programs. Unless there's any questions, I'll hand it back over to Jerry.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Director McQuarrie. Chuck.
Yeah, on the first page of the handout, on the state of good repair, is our maintenance schedule being supported by the state of good repair funds? I mean, we have schedules for replacing bus engines and batteries and things like that. So does the state of good repair support us in all those updates?
Well, the money would be available for such things as bus upgrades. Typically, we would use it more for replacing buses, I suppose, but that's certainly optional to go either way.
I would say it's available, but it's not sufficient. I mean, it's very, very helpful, and we very much appreciate it. But there's a lot of deferred capital projects, as you can see. That's why a forecast, a lot of those projects may show up in one year and they get bumped year after year while we accumulate or hope to win a big award. And then we do what we can to keep the assets, and we will keep them, in a state of good repair through the renewal type of projects where we invest in components, et cetera, engines, et cetera.
Yeah, I guess what I was looking at, I think you probably have a schedule, say, for every so many thousand or hundreds of thousands of miles for replacing engines. And does that support our planned maintenance for major things like that?
It's certainly available to help pay for those types of projects.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for either Jerry or Steve? Director Sheila or Bill?
Thank you, Chair. I believe I have 3 questions here. The first one, I received information from CARB, California Air Resources Board, and they send me different funding opportunities that come out of the cap and trade program. And I see a lot of them are actually towards fleet reduction of fleet emissions. And I was just wondering, are there any other cap and trade funding sources that we haven't discussed? Are those all some other discretionary programs?
Well, the other major one that we have applied for in the past, last year, in fact, we made a major application for a lot of fundings from what's called the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, known as TIRCP, TIRCP. We were not successful with that application. I'm not sure what our plans are for another TIRCP application in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's every 2 years with that, Steve, that particular opportunity.
Yes, that's typically what they've done.
So yeah, we will be, we'll certainly be making a run at it next year or the end of this year when that opportunity presents itself. And what we're showing you is what our needs are, and it's going to be in line with that and the goals that the board has set. I mean, the big picture, I'll get right to it. I mean, bus replacement, it's going to take millions of dollars infusion of that. But we also need the infrastructure. That's why the Terminal 2 facility being built out is critical. For us to go after more 40-foot electric buses, we need to have somewhere to charge them. That's why, to me, in my opinion, the top transit capital project on the South Coast should be MTD's Terminal 2 facility in Goleta. That's going to be 35 buses, a third of our fleet potentially housed out there. We're throwing as much formula money that we can, as you've seen in our forecast at it. But eventually, honestly, we're going to probably have to look at borrowing, because I just don't think there's going to be enough awards. So as I've discussed with Chair Davis, I am working with the financial group, a consulting firm that specializes in transportation funding and essentially borrowing. We're looking at TIFIA loans, et cetera. So we are going to explore that. MTD has an excellent balance sheet. We have very little debt, just really the 6 BYD buses on lease, I think will qualify, but it's something we're going to need to do. And if we're going to build out that facility correctly and also aggressively go after every discretionary dollar we can. And I just don't see a way. That's the way we're going to have to operate. And it's just like every other transit operator. We're all in this situation and we'll do our best.
And then,
okay, let me just jump in on that particular point, Steve, if you don't mind. Thank you, Jerry, for bringing that up, because I would like, if you could come back at some point, or even someday just on your general manager report, give us a little tutorial about what borrowing would mean and how we might do that. Because I think in preparation for looking down the line, you and I have had those conversations. It would be great to have an informative conversation with the board before we get to that particular point. I did have a question though. TIRCP grants. Did the SBCAG did receive a TIRCP grant? Is the money that we received from that was just simply for the facilities master plan, or where did our if you will allocation go to that?
Yeah, there was 1.5 million for Santa Barbara MTD, of which 300,000 went to the facilities master plan, which is excellent document for us to document what we need to do. The other 1.2 million is a part of that budget that you saw for the recommissioning of the site. Great. So the first step is going to be to get maybe 10 vehicles out there, get it operational, and then we're going to have to invest even more to really get it to the point where we can get 30, 35 buses out at that site.
Yeah, I wanted to get that in because Director Sheeler's question about other grants from the state in its genre, essentially that TIRCP grant is heading in that direction that we did do that with.
Correct. And SBCAG has funding for other projects as well as part of that grant.
Of course.
Sure. Thank you. There are two other things I did want to mention.
In
regards to the discretionary funding opportunities in the application process. It was about 2 years or so ago, we had a room full of MTD supporters who really were pushing us on our strategic plan to convert to 100% EV fleet. And I'm just wondering, are you able to harness any of the support of these individuals and groups when we put these applications together to show that the community is really behind what we're trying to accomplish?
Absolutely. I think they've been great partners. When we need a letter of support, they've been there. I think they've been understanding of how difficult a challenge is. It's an aggressive goal, and they understand that. They've been supportive whenever we've gone after discretionary funding. We should add, there's other funding sources we have tapped into. For example, we've worked closely with Southern California Edison's Charge Ready program. And they funded the infrastructure for our light duty vehicles and are currently working with us to fund and implement or handle the construction for 14 charge ports for our heavy duty program, which will allow us to bring in those 40-foot electric buses that we want to bring in. And we're hoping that they will partner with us out at Terminal 2 as well, once we start getting that facility built out. So it's a challenge because you're talking about, you're not building from the ground up big, 20 acres of vacant land. We have restrictive locations that are built out around us, and we're trying to do it step by step. And Edison's been a great partner towards achieving that goal.
And the last thing that I wanted to bring up, recently was watching, I guess it was Board of Supervisors, County Board of Supervisors, and they were talking about the county's energy and climate action plan and the kinds of GHG mitigations that they would attach to projects that triggered certain things. And I was just wondering what our input is in terms of trying to convey to them the importance of alternate transportation as a GHG or legitimate GHG mitigation strategy. It reduces vehicle miles traveled, the conversion of our bus fleet from diesel to electric vehicles, and just wondering if there's any support at that level for using our strategic plan and converting to electric vehicles as a legitimate mitigation and offset for GHG with county projects, I guess, in the South Coast.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mr. Moss, as our TTAC representative, these types of topics do come up. And Steve, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. I think you've done a good job of representing our interests and, what we're able to help with.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, I mean, it does, as Jerry says, that these things will come up occasionally at the TTAC, the Technical Transportation Advisory Committee. And anytime that I do see an opportunity to point that out, that we do have that ability, and we'll have it ongoing in a greater extent as we do acquire more battery electric vehicles. I mean, even with our current fleet of primarily diesel buses, we're still able in many cases to provide some mitigation because of getting cars off the road. So, and then once we go to electric, it'll obviously that'll be even much greater.
Okay, thank you. Bill, you may recall we sat in those meetings with the APCD a couple years ago, pushing for that to be added to with the strategies to be included within their clean air action plans.
Yes, I do recall that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, other questions at this point for either Steve or Jerry? Okay, this is an informational item. Christina, do we have anyone wishing to speak on this item?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 10 now, the General Manager's report. Director Estrada, General Manager Estrada, I should say. Jerry.
Yeah, just a couple items, some of which we've already touched on a bit. The driver barrier project is progressing. We're nearly 40 buses completed of diesel fleet. Terminal 2 reactivation is something that we're moving forward with aggressively, working with Stantec, architects, and we're doing some we're having structural engineers come out and take a good look at the facility to make sure we're good to go, and our plan is prudent. Terminal 1, we are also working with Southern California, as I mentioned earlier, to get that project going. There are some issues with this particular site that we have to work closely with the county on. So Southern California Edison's aware of that, and so far so good. We're progressing forward. I think the biggest issue with some of these projects for us, in particular Edison and some of the electric vehicle acquisition we talked about, is the opportunity for HVIP incentives in the state, getting that process and that funding opportunity available for us hopefully here in April. That'll really open up allow us to move forward more aggressively. Hopefully we'll get awarded some of those funds. Hillary, I think you had something to share with the board members.
Sure. Hello, Chair and board members. There are some slides that we could get those put up. The GM report mentioned that we are, ordering our first 4 40-foot electric buses from New Flyer, and those have we have to figure out what they're going to look like. So we have recently put out to the public. There's actually a survey, and it's been posted in our social media, and we'll continue to put that, I think, through the end of this week, for what people think they should look like. We've, as we did with our latest order of 10 40-foot Gilligs, we redesigned the livery to match our new branding, and you all went through that process. Just to clarify, the sort of survey out to the public, it's not necessarily a fully democratic process, but we want to get people's input on which one they like the best, what they like about it. And for these, we want to really show that these are all electric, right? And since this is our first foray into this kind, obviously our existing electric fleet, they had this sort of shuttle vibe to them, and they had that particular design. This, we want to match our new branding, but also convey the fact that they are all electric. So if Pablo, if you have those slides, we can show what they look like. And while we wait for that,
you're gonna have to give me 1 second.
Okay. So we worked with our marketing firm who helped us rebrand Saltus Ventures to come up with these and to whittle them down to 3 options.
So Hillary, just before you put the pictures up, maybe just verbally describe how they might change from the, if you will, new branding that we did on the buses that we have today, and
Sure.
why we're looking at something and what we're trying to convey.
Yeah, so I think the idea is that it would be clear they're part of the same agency's fleet, right? We sort of did some research at other agencies of how they, as more and more of them add sort of alternative fuel vehicles or electric vehicles, buses, sometimes they change to a totally different color. For example, San Diego MTS, their sort of color scheme on everything is red and white, but they have a few that are electric. Actually, I think they might have New Flyers. Those were green and white, right? So I don't think we want to go like just change to a completely different color. Thankfully, our branding colors are sort of more environmental, blues and greens. And so we want to stay in that same sort of color family, but we also want to move to get the, sorry about that. I need to pull up the slides myself. It looks like I'm probably not able to get them up. But we have the ability to, we want to make sure that we show people it's all electric. So that could be demonstrated to by some kind of little all electric kind of logo mark that then we can put on all of our other different items. Like, so for example, the ones that we've ordered, the Ford Transit vans, we'll be able to put that same little logo mark on it. And we've got, as we move towards 2030, we're going to keep getting more and more. So we want to have that brand go across all of them. So I'm going to pull up, if I could be made a co-host, I will pull up these images. Thanks for your patience. We're just building the anticipation. It's going to be even more exciting. We pull them up.
You know how much I liked yellow buses back in the day.
That's right.
I got to tell you that the green that we chose, the front of the bus, that green, I just love. I mean, it actually knocks me out every time I see one on the street. So total comfort.
Good, great. Glad to hear it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thanks again for your patience. All right. Let's go full screen. All right, can everyone see that? Great. So this is Design A. Like I said, there's 3 of them. So Design A, it has, if you can think in your mind's eye of what our new buses look like, our newest Gillig buses look like. They do have these same waves. The front is very similar. this version has kind of a little pinstripe added to it around those elements. Kind of the idea is it kind of has a charge running through it, right? There's a little bit of more dynamic motion with that. And then towards the rear, it just has all electric, and then a little lightning bolt towards the back. This does have like an all blue back, which is different than what we've had. Our current newer buses have sort of teal towards the top and then white at the bottom there. If I go to the next slide, there we go. Here's design B. So the front again, and these buses are shaped a little bit differently than the Gillig we're used to. Gillig is just a rectangle, right? There's not a lot of curved edges, you know, so this has something that's a little more curved in the front and along the top. It's a little bit taller because of the battery packs that are on the top. So you can see this version, design B, has the pinstripes again. This part's pretty much the same. And then towards the back, it has an all electric mark. And so this is one of those logo marks I was describing, where we could maybe use this across the rest of the fleet, obviously in future bus purchases, but also sort of in telling our story in printed materials. It has a little leaf that also looks like a road coming out of the eye and kind of going off into the horizon. And so that's design B. And so the front color is pretty much what our newer Gilligs look like as well. The rear, it does leave some white space at the bottom. And then at the top has the dark blue and then teal. And then in the last slide, here's design C. This does not have the pinstripe. We just kept this sort of matching the current one. It's a little plainer at the front and in the back. And then this just has the sort of leaf off to the side with the little road in the center of it. So this is whittled down from several, and I think you sort of get a sense as I flip back through what the differences are. So one, for anyone watching at home, please do head to our website. If you go to sbmtd.gov/electricfuture, you can find the link there to take the survey. Actually, the survey is embedded into that page. People are welcome to share that and weigh in, and then happy to, you know, take any questions from the board or input or whatever you like.
Okay. I was going to wonder when we get to get our input in that. So, Director Tabor.
I was just wondering why design A wasn't smiling. Design B and C are smiling.
Yeah.
That's a good question. It looks like one of the aspects of the bus didn't make it into the first one. That's really funny. Good notice. It's not a subliminal push towards B or C, I promise.
That's a good one. Okay. What's our process and where are you going with this?
Sorry, say that again?
I said, what's our process coming up, you know, in terms of making the final selection, and we're, you know, going to come back to the board, staff going to make that decision. What's your process from here?
Good question. I might ask Jerry how we see this winding up in the end, but I think getting input now would be helpful.
Yeah, we're going to take the public input and we'll make a recommendation. We'll share that with the board before we go forward.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear what the public did have to say. Okay. Good job, Hillary. It's always fun. Always.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Jerry, you want to wrap up?
Yeah, that concludes what I wanted to share, but I'm happy to answer any questions for anything else related to the GM report.
Okay, Director Tabor.
Mr. Chair, Jerry, did I see lights on at the transit center?
That's a good, you know, there are lights on it. There are lights on at the Trans Center. There was an article in the Independent this weekend, which was very, you know, it was an excellent article, very happy with it. But we wanted to be clear The transit center is not open yet. The interior will become open once we get back to collection of fares. That's when it'll happen. It's not, so we had that discussion earlier. It's probably a month or two away, at least at this point. But the outside of the circle is certainly being used, and we're certainly happy to get, the positive article about the investment, and we'll just have to get the timing right on the opening.
Good question. Good answer. Okay. Not hearing anything else, I'm going to jump on to the next item. Thank you, Jerry, for the report. Next item is other business and reports. Since during the emergency period, no other committees are meeting, I can report on the Kyriel Ad Hoc Committee. We held, as you know, we had 3 solid proposals for our Kyriel property for residential apartment development. The ad hoc and our consultant staff interviewed the 3 proposers. And from those interviews, we have now submitted back to them a list of questions and clarifications. Within the next few weeks, ad hoc will be coming back to make a recommendation back to the board on one of these teams, basically to move forward with. I'd like to stress that we have 3 solid proposals. We're not wanting to disqualify anybody at this point. We will be looking to basically enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with one of the teams to see if we can get to an agreement in pretty quick time. So we'll be back to you. I'd probably say within a month or so. That would be my guess. Okay. Any other items, community-wise, transit-wise, personal-wise, you want to bring up at this point?
Yeah, I have a question. With the amount that we have put into the new transit center or revised transit center, has there been any thought of a need for any kind of security there, either a person, or I know we've got cameras, but with the interface with the public, and some of them may be a cause for trouble than others, has any thought been given to actually having, say, a guard there to kind of support the drivers that might have confrontations with the public?
My answer to that question is, that you see that at many stations around the country. Some transit operators have their own, enforcement arm. I don't think communities our size, that's very uncommon, I think, for community our size. And I'm really proud of the work that our employees do in interacting with the public. Our supervisors in particular, I think do a great job of diffusing situations all the time. And I think we're in pretty good shape in that perspective, but we're always, we'll keep an open mind. But I think the approach we've taken for years has been the right fit for Santa Barbara and our agency. And the driver barriers are another step to keeping our employees safe.
Okay, it's just like a new penny. The old penny, we didn't worry so much about, when things got scratched or something like that. But now we have, something that I think we can be proud of, and I just wouldn't like to see anything happen to it.
Yeah, I agree. We take, maintaining our assets and a state of good repair very seriously. We've invested a lot. And I was out there just last week, Friday, doing a walkthrough. And I've talked to Mr. Robertson, our fleet facilities manager. And, we're going to be doing a few things to stay on top of it, because I agree with you. Some of the steps we did with the windows was anticipating problems, whether it be, whatever it might be, to be able to clean it up quickly. And that is something we're committed to. And I want to make sure everyone at MTD understands that we maintain this, we invested in it, we want to keep it this way as long as we can. So we are taking that very seriously. We're probably going to be doing walkthroughs every 3 to 4 months.
Dr. Limburger, Jen.
Yeah, so somewhat related, that made me think of this. Does MTD have any representation on SB Act?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of on SB Act, but to be happy to have a conversation with you about it and learn more about it and see if there's a role for us.
Great.
Good question. Okay. Not seeing anything else. Okay. I am going to move to adjourn the meeting. Wish you all to stay safe. And in light of Mardi Gras, laissez les bons. And we will see you next month. Goodbye, everybody.
All right, see you.